Dear police officers of Reddit, have you ever responded to a call for paranormal reasons? Hi all, my name is Em, and welcome back to the channel. Let's see how these stories mix one of the most real professions with some of the most fantastical monsters. Story 1. My uncle was the sheriff of a small town in New Mexico. He was the most hardcore person in our family. Super straight-laced, never really BS'd, and wasn't at all a joker. So when he told this story, backed up by my aunt, we all believed it without question. A local reporter named Bob D would always show up at any major police activity from the police scanner, be it car wrecks, fires, anything worth maybe reporting in the local paper. Everybody in the force knew Bob D. He was around at least once or twice a week at various police activities. Bob was a bit of a joker himself. He would mess with people by flicking behind their ears. People would react to the flicks thinking it was a bug, only to turn around and see it was Bob joking around. Everybody liked Bob. Unfortunately, Bob had lung cancer and died pretty suddenly. His wife buried him, against his wishes. He wanted to be cremated. For the next couple of weeks after his funeral, people kept talking about seeing Bob at car wrecks, fires, all the same stuff he used to report on. There were 20 to 30 reports like this from civilians and members of the force. My uncle didn't buy it, until the night he and my aunt showed up at our house, gun drawn, pale as paper. We asked him what the heck happened, and he had to sit down, take his breath, compose himself, and start to outline what happened. Note, this was a guy that I never saw get rattled by anything. He said, my aunt and he were sitting on the couch in their house watching TV. My uncle kept scratching at his ear over and over. Finally, my aunt asked him what the problem was, and he turned around, just in time to see their bedroom door open. Bob D standing there in the doorway. Clear as day. My uncle jumped up, cussed or something, got my aunt's attention, who turned to see him there too. As soon as they both made eye contact with him, Bob smiled, turned, walked across the living room and out their front door, closed the door behind himself and was gone. My uncle got control of himself and ran outside, gun drawn looking for Bob. But he was gone. At that point, they ran over to our place that night. At work the next day, all the guys on the force were giving my uncle lots of "we told you so." People around town said they saw Bob D show up at police scenes for at least 2 to 3 months. My dad saw him in our dark room in our basement with a friend. He was flicking their ears in the dark. During the 3rd month, people that saw him kept saying he was looking worse and worse. My uncle saw him 2 more times, each time confirming he was looking more and more worn. My dad had concluded that he was decomposing, and his ghost was reflecting that process. Every time my ear itches, I get goosebumps. Somebody commented, "Bloody heck, man." Geez, Opie, my ears started itching as soon as I read that last comment, and now I've got the heebie-jeebies. Part of me thinks that if the wife had just cremated the dude as he wished, this wouldn't have happened. That being said, I'm interested in what finally got the guy to stop. I wonder if his body had just literally decomposed so much that it just stopped altogether, or what. It's always the stories where the staunch unbeliever swears they saw something that truly make me believe in it. Story 2. Worked as a police officer in a small town in rural Nebraska. Back in the 90s, I was patrolling through town in winter. We had several abandoned houses in town, but one seemed to have the attraction of copper thieves, so we had to keep an eye on it. Driving by it around 7 p.m., since it sat on a corner lot, I had a clear view of all 4 sides of the house. As I drove around the corner, nothing looks out of the ordinary. About 2 hours later, I drive by again, and the back door is wide open. I know that the back door was not open when I drove by it earlier. Looking at the snow on the ground around the house, there were no footprints. So I think, what the heck? Call dispatch, tell them I'm investigating an open door at that address, and ask for a county sheriff to start my way. I walk to the open door, pull out my flashlight, and shine it inside. The house has obviously been gutted for the most part. The plaster walls have been torn down, debris piles everywhere. Since there are no footprints in the snow around the door other than mine, and with all the dust in the floor not showing any footprints, I chalked it up to the wind, or maybe the door just opened on its own. I was about to secure the door when I heard a loud thump come from upstairs, and what sounded like kids laughing. So I enter the house and yell out, "Police department, come downstairs." More of what sounds like kids playing. I tell dispatch that it sounds like there are kids in the house and start making my way through the kitchen into the living room where the stairs are, all the while cautiously checking the main floor. 2 more times I hear something upstairs, but since I've had no response, I start thinking maybe it's an animal. Still, I heard what I'd swear was kids laughing. I head upstairs and it all gets quiet. The upstairs is relatively small with a hallway at the top of the stairs that has 1 bedroom on the right, one straight ahead at the end of the hall, and a bedroom on the left. As I get to the top of the stairs, I hear a thump in the bedroom to the left. I carefully peek around the door, and it's an empty room with a small pile of plaster and wood debris in the middle. No kidding. Sitting on top of the pile of debris was a page torn out of a child's book, with a picture of a police officer on it. The hair stood up on the back of my neck. I got out of that room, quickly cleared the other rooms upstairs, and got the frick out of there. Told dispatch nobody was in the house, locked the back door, and never went back in there. Somebody commented, "Damn, son, now that's creepy." Either this was one hell of a coincidence, or OP was being watched by something or someone in that house. I feel like at some point, even if I was actually obliged to do my job, I would just nope out of there as fast as I could. I guess it's a good thing I don't want to be a cop, because they could never ask me to look at any room that wasn't clearly lit and had a priest with me at all times. Story 3. Yes, actually, really freaking weird. Back when I was working as a cop on a military base, I loved working the night shift. Didn't deal with 99% of the BS that day shift dealt with. And what little stuff we did deal with was usually really interesting. Well, most every building on a base is alarmed, and the alarms are tied right into the desk, so we know the instant they go off. When we get an alarm activation, we close the base and go check the building. Pull in all the doors, see if we can get in. If we can, we go into the building and secure it. Check all the doors and corners to see if someone set the alarm off. Well, one night I was on patrol with my alpha partner, and we got called to respond to an alarm activation at the elementary school. So we go, secure the building, and call in that the building is all secure. No problem, keep patrolling. So about 15 to 20 minutes go by and we get another alarm activation. We get back out there and check now that there's a maintenance door open that leads into a boiler room-ish thing. Nothing in it. We close it, lock it, and get out. Another 20 minutes and another alarm. We respond, all the doors are still locked and we can't get in. The maintenance door is locked. Call in the all clear. This time my buddy and I sit on opposite sides of the school and watch to see if someone is coming and yanking the doors real hard to set the alarm off. We sit there and watch. Nothing happens, and right as we're about to leave, another alarm activation as we're sitting there. We inform the desk that we'd like the building manager on site to help us secure the interior and to let us in. This is now like 3 a.m. Building custodian shows up and we start doing a walkthrough, checking all the classrooms and checking all the maintenance rooms. And that's when we see one of the maintenance doors open with the lights on in the room. Now, this room is literally the size of a closet. We walk down there and look in. No one's in it, and the door is locked when it closes. We look in there and we find a single footprint of a bare foot made of water. Left foot if I recall, of a small child. Freaked the living heck out of us because no one reported a missing child, and the entire building was clear and still locked up. No one left, no one entered, and we checked every inch of that dang place. Literally a 3-hour deep sweep, including ceiling titles. Freaked the ever-loving crap out of us, and to this day, my partner refuses to go into that school. Speaking of which, schools are really freaking spooky when they're empty. This reminds me of this abandoned school in my town that's supposed to be closed off, but just about everyone knew someone who knew someone that could get them in. We went at noon on a bright sunny day, so needless to say, it was completely lit in most of the school. It was still absolutely haunting, as there were random shadows everywhere and we kept hearing noises. I can't imagine if my friends tried to convince me to go late at night. Add in a creepy kid ghost and it sounds like my literal worst nightmare. Story 4. When I was in high school, the days before cell phones were common, my friends were to come over to pick me up from my school one night. We'd made plans at school for them to pick me up at 7 p.m. At 6, my parents said I had to come with them to do something, and I totally forgot to call my friends and tell them. They came to my house at 7 p.m., and they called the house phone. No one answered. There were 4 of them in the car. They all told us the exact same story. They said that they were about to pull out of my driveway, but they saw someone peek through the blinds from the bedroom on the top floor right. That was my room, so they assumed that I was freaking around. 5 more times, they said that someone would peek through the blinds, and a couple of them said they even saw the person's eyes. We got home at probably 7:10, 7:15, and they were still in our driveway. One of my friends came over and said they thought I was messing with them. Then they asked me, "So who's staying in your room?" I told them that no one was. So they asked, "Who's home at your house right now?" Again, I told them no one. Their stone-cold faces then told me that they had repeatedly seen over the last 15 minutes. At first, we all thought there was a burglar in the house or something, so we called the cops. They came over and inspected the house. There were 0 signs of a break-in. Nothing was touched and nothing was stolen. Our house had an alarm on it, so there's no way someone could have come into the house without setting off the alarm. My family, my friends, and the cop all kind of stood around for a few minutes, trying to make sense of the situation. My friends swore up and down, and still do, that they couldn't have imagined what they saw. All 4 of them saw the same things, and it wasn't particularly a dark night, so their eyes wouldn't be playing tricks on them. To this day, none of us can make sense of the situation. Somebody commented, "I would be afraid to sleep in my room after that." Story 5. Not my call, but my dad served for 25 years. Wasn't really a ghost story, but I think it's worth telling. One night, he gets a call from a woman who says her neighbor has made a pact with the devil. The woman calling is about 35 and a religious wacko. The neighbor called about her neighbor, who was about 75 at the time. My dad went over and knocked on the door, and the old lady answered. All happy, nice place. It has even been decorated the same way for the past 50 years. She invites my dad in without even asking why he came, makes him some coffee, and asks how his day was. Naturally, at this point, my dad was wondering what the heck the call was about, but it became clear soon. At some point, my dad realizes he isn't the only person she's talking to, and that she thinks her apartment is full of people. My dad thanks her for the coffee, and she tells him to come back anytime. The whole time she was talking, he was writing down the names of the people she was talking to, and did some research on her when he got back. Turns out she was talking to family members who were all dead. She had a daughter, 3 sons, a brother, and a husband, all dead, and she had no family and no friends. She hadn't spoken to another person in years. Her groceries were delivered, and she rarely left her apartment. Over the next 19 years, my dad took care of her. My sister and I came over all the time and just sat and talked with her. She even taught me how to cook. Over the years, she stabilized and stopped talking to her dead relatives. She just needed people to live with. She actually lived till she was 94 and died in the guest room of my parents' house, since it had become harder to take care of her from a distance as she got closer to the end. She was like a grandma to us. Too long, didn't read. Nut calling about devil contacting old ladies turned into a great part of my whole family life, and one of the few moments that made me think humanity can be good. Somebody commented, "Your dad is a hero." Like all these comments said, Opie's dad is probably one of the nicest people I've read about in any of these stories. He saw someone who was in obvious need of assistance and decided to be a good person and help her, instead of simply leaving her by herself to continue to struggle. I thought I was going to despise the woman who called to report her, but strangely enough, I'm a little thankful for her, because it means that this older lady got the help and care she deserved. Story 6. Not me, but my dad was a cop for 32 years. This was one of his craziest calls. A call goes out for reported screaming. It's mid-January. Important later. My father and another officer respond to find a known deranged individual. Very long rap sheet and has been in and out of psychiatric care for years. Sitting on the front porch holding a double-sided wood-splitting axe. Steam is coming up off the grass and there are chunks lying all over the lawn. Upon interviewing the suspect, he admits that he and a friend were playing poker. The suspect was losing nearly every hand and came to the conclusion that his friend was a haint, Southern for ghost, and was cheating him. The suspect grabbed the axe and chased his friend outside and hacked him into dozens of pieces, thus causing the warm blood to create steam on the grass. My dad tells the suspect that he needs to get in the police car because it's hidden proof. He said the suspect dropped the axe and sprinted to get in the back seat while thanking him for helping him. Too long, didn't read. My father convinced an axe murderer to get in his cop car because it's ghost proof. Edit, holy crap, got my first Reddit gold. I'm gonna retire in Guatemala. Somebody commented, this is actually the most terrifying story I've read in this thread. Story 7. Called to residents out in the Boonies. This was in Wyoming, so the Boonies are really the Boonies. At about 11 p.m., about suspicious activity. When we get there, we're told by the family living there are very strange screams coming from a creek area about 1,000 feet out. And sure enough, waiting outside on the porch with them for about a minute, I hear it. It's very hard to describe what it sounded like. It was like a woman in very severe distress, but higher pitched, and each scream lasted for about 10 to 15 seconds. It never sounded like it was saying anything. It just sounded like a cry of sheer terror. And to repeat it again. We tell the family we're gonna investigate, so we just walked down to the creek since it was nice out. We hear about 2 more screams getting louder as we approach the creek. By now, we're both kind of freaked out. There are 2 possibilities. Someone is getting murdered or maimed in the creek bed, or it's a wild animal. As we approach the creek bed, we hear no screams for about 5 minutes. We search around and find nothing, yelling at the top of our lungs for somebody to come towards if they're there. Then we hear the exact same scream behind us, exactly from where we came from. We get about halfway back to the house, and the scream comes so loudly. It seems to be right next to us. We frantically shine our flashlights everywhere and find nothing. No eye glints of animals, no rustling of bushes, just silence. We trace our steps back and the scream comes from around the creek again. This time it lasted about 30 seconds and was much louder than before. Our retreat becomes a little more hastened. By this time, we were both scared poopless and verified with the family to call us again if they had heard it. They never called again, and we got the heck out of there. I still don't know what it was. As an avid outdoorsman, I know no animal makes a cry like that, especially one that can move stealthily without being spotted by flashlights. Something else that weirded me out was that it was completely silent while the screams were happening. To me, it low-key sounds like the family was trying to trap the cops who went out there, and almost were willing to sacrifice them to whatever it was that was making those screams. But hey, that's just my theory. Story 8. I am not a cop, but 3 years ago, our very elderly next-door neighbor died suddenly in her house. They found her body 5 days later in the kitchen. Fast forward to last summer, I'm sitting in my house watching a movie, and all of a sudden about 8 police cars come out of nowhere, sirens blaring lights, and most park in that empty house. Some park in my driveway, so I went outside to see what was up. A police officer went through the quick formalities and asked if I had seen anything strange in the past 5 minutes. I replied no and rather hesitantly asked what was going on. He said that the police department received a call from the house, and when the operator picked up the line, it went dead. I stayed with a friend that night. Somebody commented, if your neighbor had life alert, it could have been that. I've had several calls as an EMT where a person who had died had life alert. Their family didn't disconnect it. Life alert called their phone for a check-in, they didn't answer, and then 911 was notified. Story 9. My uncle works for dispatch in my town, and he recently told my family of the weirdest call he's ever gotten. He says that he received a call from a landline one night, and when he answered it, there was only static on the other end. This happened 2 more times. Finally, he calls a squad to go out for the address for the caller ID. When the cops got there and walked into the house, they immediately saw that there was a dead body. The person had been dead for 5 months. The craziest part about it was there's no electricity or any other utility working, so there's no way they should have been able to get those calls into dispatch. But if they hadn't, who knows how long that person's body would have stayed there. This is one that just doesn't make sense to me, paranormal or not. If it really was a spirit, why did it take 5 months to call for help? But I guess the only thing we know about the paranormal for fact is that sometimes their motives can't be explained. Story 10. I was called to a job at night where the informant said there were firearms being shot in the area, semi-rural. Nothing strange at first glance. Searched the general area and found nothing, so I approached the informant. She was a middle-aged hippie. She proceeded to tell me that a UFO had landed a couple of properties over, and she saw the alien shooting laser guns at cattle. Story 11. My platoon mates responded to a call where the lady said the ghost of a cat was under her bathroom sink. She also never owned a cat, so she didn't know whose ghost cat it was. One of them chased it out with a broom. Problem solved. Somebody commented, they should have taken it to a ghost animal shelter. Okay, this one was a little funny. Just the idea of some guy showing up and just having to listen to this woman. And think of how to potentially calm her down enough that he could leave. So he just grabs a broom and starts chasing an imaginary cat out of the house. Story 12. During summer in Wyoming, there's always some type of ambient animal sounds. Frogs croaking, crickets chirping, owls hooting, coyotes howling, etc. But one time, there was nothing until we were leaving and the screams had stopped. Then a frog started croaking. It gives me the creeps just thinking about it still. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.